All right, so today's training is going to be on property evaluations and comparables. We want to start off with some of the basic terms that we should all be comfortable using, and you should know the definitions behind them. Gross income and gross potential income, or gross potential rent, those are actually different numbers. The gross income is what's actually coming in at the time, so it doesn't account for vacancies. Whereas your gross potential income and rent, that's going to incorporate the vacancy units at a market rent. So you're going to have a higher number than that. Other income, that's going to be your laundry, your storage, parking, other amenities that your tenants might pay for. So that's going to be your other income. And that is actually what comes to your effective gross income, includes all of your vacancies plus your other income total for the month or on an annual basis. Your operating expenses, those are going to be a total of all of your expenses for the property, which include your real estate taxes, your insurance, utilities, management, repairs, contract services such as pest control or gardening, and advertising. So if you are advertising vacant units, or if it's a retail space and you're advertising a lease space. So after minusing all your expenses from all of your income, you come with a net operating income, and that is one of the numbers we use to generate a cap rate. Your debt service, that is how much, if you have a loan on the property, that is how much you're paying every month on that loan balance. So then your cash flow is all of your net operating income minus your debt service is your cash flow. So that's going to show you how much at the end of the day you are actually bringing in.
Can I join in?
Absolutely. So, like we talked about, income is going to incorporate the rent and any other expenses or fees that their tenants are paying. Doesn't include deposits, or but it could, if it's a multifamily, could include pet rent as well. Going through your expenses, if you own a property, you're more than likely paying for your real estate tax, which is always based on the purchase price of the area that you're in. Your insurance, utilities, sometimes your utilities might be paid for the tenant or not. These are all questions that you should be asking the sellers when you're gathering the information to evaluate. You can ask them for a P&L, profit and loss statement. Hopefully if you can get it for the last 12 months, if not 2 years. That's going to give you a better idea of how the property is performing. And when we get down to our comparables, we want to compare the property to other properties in the area that have sold or on the market to be sold. We're going to look at the proximity. So a lot of times in larger markets like ours, multifamily properties can be looked at within a proximity of a half-mile, mile, or even zip code. Retail properties, when they start to become larger, like office buildings or large retail centers, you might have to look at other cities or other buildings that are comparable. Maybe the size of the building is the same, or the year built is. A lot of the times here with multifamily and even retail and offices, you're going to look at the amenities that are offered. So say that your apartment complex has all in-unit washer and dryers, or if they have a washing facility, if there's a gym or a pool. All of these amenities can add up to making a difference. When you look at the accessibility, how easy is it to get to, where is it located? This is probably bigger on the retail, office, industrial front, depending on traffic, highways, and things like that. What we really want to look for at the comparables, which is our price per square foot, our price per unit, our cap rates, and for multifamily, your GRM. And all of this is we're going to look at price per square foot and price per unit. A lot of times you don't know how many units are in the building or how large the units are, and that can skew these numbers as well. Cap rates can also be shown in a way that are not 100% accurate. If a property is being marketed based off of effective gross or gross potential, or if it's actually showing the raw gross income, it can change the cap rates. If there's a vacancy factor, it needs to be incorporated. A lot of times you're going to see a vacancy factor of 3 to 5% on multifamily buildings, and relatively the same on the retail. When you're evaluating retail properties, you're going to look at the lease that's in place. A lot of times you'll see a single net or double or triple net, and in the past we've gone over that. These three are the main net platforms, which is your real estate taxes, insurance, and your utilities. Who's paying for those? The stronger the lease, the larger the tenant. Say they're a national branded tenant, they're going to have a stronger lease than your other properties owned by a dry cleaners that's maybe owned by a mom and pop shop. So all of those are key factors. Again, the term as well. If they have a 10-year lease in place, or if they're month to month, these are factors that we have to pay attention to. When we're going down and looking at our income, we'll get down to a cash flow, and that's if the property is going to assume a loan or take a loan out on the property. Cap rate only shows you the percentage that you're going to make if it's an all cash acquisition. So our cash and cash is our return on investment, which is our initial down payment compared to how much we're bringing in on an annual basis. We can actually figure this out by using a loan constant. If you can generalize a percentage for a loan on a term, we can go over the math on how to figure that out. That way you can give your clients a pretty rough estimate of what they'll be paying in debt service per month and give them an idea of what their cash flow is. So when we're looking at rent comparables, that's going to help us look at our pro forma for the property. Say we have a property that's not performing very well right now, it has some vacancies, the rent is under market. We're going to look at rent comparables, which we also have a platform for that's offered to you at no cost. You're going to look at it very closely. If it's your subject property has 2 bedrooms, you're going to look for other properties that have mainly 2 bedrooms. You're going to compare the unit sizes. You're going to look at the amenities, and you're going to be able to judge what the potential rent of that unit could be. And then you'll talk about loss to rent, which is the difference between market rent and the current rent. So then we'll be able to market the upside potential on that unit. Any questions?
Go ahead, Charlie.
My question was on the expenses for the triple net. So for utilities, I find it common that also includes like common area maintenance, like landscaping. Sometimes you'll see parking lot, things of that nature as well. So that was just a question if that's normally included in one of the nets of the triple nets as well.
Definitely. So your utilities can also be part of your CAM fees and charges, which could also incorporate the roof and structure or the parking lot as well. You're going to see most of that in a triple net property.
Yeah.
A lot of double nets will cover the real estate and the taxes and insurance, but they might not cover the roof and structure. So you're going to see a lot of different variations.
Yeah, I've also seen a lot of where they're advertised as triple net leases, and they'll cover most of the CAM, almost all the CAM utilities except for roof and structure.
Correct. And
they'll still market it as a triple net lease, but you got to make sure.
But it's more of a double net lease.
Right.
But it covers all the main 3, so they'll still call it a triple net.
Yeah, just something to be careful about.
And then we have absolute triple nets, which we've gone over, which is no landlord responsibilities, where the tenant pays for everything.
There's also a bondable net, which some banks will want, and that is also, it's like a super absolute net, where sometimes even the personal property taxes of the LLC owners of the owner have to be paid for by the tenant.
There you go.
Why would debt service not be included on expenses? Some might want to know.
I actually just didn't bring this over here.
No, debt service is not, you have it right. Some people consider it an expense, and some people try to put it on expense, but
the difference why it wouldn't be is because if it's on there, it might be because there's an assumable loan and it's showing the current expense at the time. More than likely, it's not going to be on there because the new buyer is going to be getting a different loan, or if they buy all cash.
See, the thing is, you
it
want to
won't
keep,
be-
you want to keep the actual expense of the building separate, because what if it's a CAD? What if they own it cash? There is no debt service. But also, what if this guy that bought it is, first time investor, and he had to get a hard money loan for 12%. And the next person is a REIT that's going to be able to get, market rate financing. So the debt service is individual to the owner, not to, so
Correct.
that's why it stayed separate.
The debt service has more of an effect on your cash flow and your return on investment. And that's looking at the individual purchasing the property, not the expenses for the property itself.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the point we're trying to make there. So, let's see. So your cash on cash is really just your cash flow after your debt service divided by your down payment. And that's kind of the number a lot of investors are looking at. Is it going to be profitable? Is it going to support their real estate goals? You might find someone that is okay with taking a zero or a negative cash flow depending on the situation.
Can I say something? The depreciation also could be considered as a cash flow, because the money should depreciate. You don't pay taxes on it, so you could allocate it in separate account. It's a cash flow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of the times you're still going to take into principal reduction, the way that the property is appreciation, and the depreciation you can be able to take off your taxes as well. So there's definitely different plays of why you purchase properties in different areas. But like we were saying, we're fortunate enough to be in a large market to where our comparables can come easier to us. But when you're working out with, say, industrial spaces, say even Lancaster, Palmdale, there's less velocity, so there's not a lot of sales being transacted in the area. So you might have to space it out a little bit further. But just remember to keep your properties around the same size, hopefully the same year. And the amenities is more for for Class A offices, and your multifamily buildings will set that apart. And expenses for multifamily as well, there's probably going to be extra management fees where you don't see that in retail. So, if you have any other questions about getting comparables or how to evaluate? When you're prospecting and you're getting a rent roll from an investor, make sure it has the term of the lease, the type of unit. So for multifamily, you want to know if it's a 2-bedroom and a 1-bath, or if it's a 3+2. Those are bigger factors. If you can get the square footage per unit, that's beneficial as well. A lot of times you're going to come in contact with sellers who say they don't want to give you their rent roll because it has too much personal information. You could always get a rent roll without the tenant's information on there. All you need is the rent, the lease term, and the size and the type of unit. Those are the main factors for that. So when we're doing multifamily, we're always going to look at price per unit, price per square foot, and the cap rates. And then with, does anyone know what GRM is?
Gross rate multiplier.
Does anyone know what that number represents?
The percentage of what the building will cash on cap, what your return on investment is.
How many years will it take to amortize the price?
So the GRM represents how many years off of the gross income will it take to pay off at that sales price. So if you have a 10 GRM, it's going to take 10 years of that gross rent to pay off this current sales price. And it's a soft number. It's not used too much anymore. Most people are looking at cap rates because the GRM is, it doesn't account for rental increases, it doesn't account for vacancies or expenses. So it's a very broad number. But most investors are looking between 10 and 15. But if you look at our market, you're going to notice that most of them are over the 15. Some of them even over 20. West Hollywood, Santa Monica, you're looking at a 23, 24 GRM. So just think about that in terms of where you're looking for investment pieces for your clients. Obviously, a higher GRM is going to be a lower cap rate. That's the correlation. So just when you're evaluating, you want to get as much information from the sellers as you possibly can. Look at their expenses. Sometimes they build their own personal expenses in there. That's something that you want to look at. maybe that they're paying themselves, especially in retail, dry cleaners, businesses. The business expenses are something you have to analyze very deeply. So. Does anyone have questions about rental comparables? All right. Well, these are the main factors of evaluating a property. If you guys have any trouble getting comparables off of CoStar, please let us know. We have one-on-one training for all of that. Just remember proximity, size, year, amenities.
That is very important because when you sit down with an investor, you want to be able to like explain to them how you came up with the value for the property and how the comps that you're using are the best comps out there. Okay, sometimes like when everyone's used to residential, where you're going by square footage on properties that have sold within the last few months, right in that same neighborhood if possible. And that's great for smaller multifamily. It's also good for strip centers and things like that. But there's some of these properties that, some of these comps for a Dollar General in Victorville, the best comp for that might be in Texas, not another one in California. Right. So you might have, on these net lease properties and some of the retail, it's going to go more on comp is going to be something that's the same size market, same traffic flow, and comparable sales. Because most of these retail and net lease properties, the value is all about the sales and how long the lease is. The land might not be worth anything. But then you get that same property in Philadelphia or Chicago that only has 1 or 2 years left on a lease. So as a net lease prospect, it's pretty bad when you got 1 or 2 years, but the land might be the value. So you always have to look at those little things because your investor may not be sophisticated, may not know, or they might know, and if you don't have that, if you don't have comps that show that and justify it, they're not gonna hire you to do the job.
And Craig brought up a good point about the potential of the property as well. Not always, because of apartment buildings on a plot of land, is it the best use for that plot of land? You might find that it might be redeveloped for a retail center, or if you're finding a duplex that can be built into a 5-unit apartment complex. Keep the box, get outside the box every once in a while and think about the potential that the property could be. You could end up bringing your client a lot more value that way.
Yeah, and I've got something to kind of say about that as well. So, when you're talking the single tenant triple net deals, and especially with retail as well, retail centers, industrial, one thing that I look at, one of the first things I look at are the market rents compared to kind of what the tenants are paying in that building, because that kind of goes to what you're speaking on. What's the ability to re-tenant the property and have it producing that same amount of income if the tenant leaves? So that's kind of something that I look at as well.
So if you see a tenant with 2-3 years left and they're below market, you have an opportunity to maybe bring in a new tenant for a higher income. Thanks, Rob. Anyone have anything to add? Thank you, Artie.
Nope.
Well, thanks for coming in today. If you have any other questions, please let me know.